Hello and welcome, my name is Trismegistus and today we're going to be reading through and humming along to the latest Factorio Friday Facts. Friday Facts 435, Space Age Soundtrack Release. Posted by Albert and Clonan. Hello, it is a busy time fixing bugs and cleaning up after the Space Age release. So just a very quick one this week, covering the availability of the new soundtrack, some bug fixing numbers, and also that the experimental version is available to join, and we can go through that and how you do that when we get there. I hope you've all been enjoying playing the expansion. I know there's been quite a lot of posts on Reddit about people kind of realising how big it is. It's what I've been saying for quite a while, but yeah, it's a huge expansion. And it really does build on the original game, so I'm sure you've all been diving into the content and enjoying what's been going on. I have been formulating my content plans, and I'm not really going to talk about them in that because I feel like I talk about them every video now. But yeah, I'm hoping to put out some interesting and different stuff over the coming weeks, because I suspect that the Friday Facts will kind of start to dry out. Factorio Space Age Soundtrack Release by Albert. During the last few weeks, our dear Pater, the music composer on the Factorio Space Age expansion, has been working on selecting, remixing, and mastering the very best tracks of the entire expansion in order to prepare an album with the best possible quality to represent the soundtrack of the DLC. The selected tracks have been remixed to enhance and intensify its dynamics to give them a proper album format experience. All the recording sessions with the musicians and the electronic compositions are paying off here. Many sections of tracks that were originally composed but then cut from the final game tracks have been released in this album. The album length is 2 hours, 4 minutes and 27 seconds and includes the ambience of the 4 new planets and the space area. You'll find the release album on Steam. We hope you enjoy it. So if you weren't aware, I think the original soundtrack was literally tracks from the game and that was it. They included a few bonus bits and pieces. There was like the trailer track, which is obviously what one of the ones I play. I can't remember whether I do it at the beginning or the end. I think I do both actually, don't I? But there's because there were 2 trailers, there was the sort of story one and the talky one, and they have a few bonuses on there, but it's basically the tracks are almost just lifted from the game soundtrack basically, whereas this is actually a remastering, a recomposition to a degree of the tracks that are actually in the game. So it does make it more unique and means that there are bits and pieces that aren't in the game. But I guess one of the things they had to consider is, of course, they had the what they called the bits where it like composes an extra bit to the music, and of course they probably couldn't capture those in the actual soundtrack. So I think maybe this is like the compensation is the wrong word, but they've kind of added in some bits that were perhaps cut in order to almost make it more rounded as a proper soundtrack. That's not unusual. I say it's probably more usual for them to be doing this than what the original soundtrack was. I've said before, I'm not 100% a fan of some of the planet related themes, but that's entirely down to a personal taste thing. I do think it's all very good music, but I say it's just not, some of it's not exactly my cup of tea. But I'm really looking forward to listening to the space ones in particular, because I really quite like those tracks. And Volcanus is a really, what would you call it, like big and epic soundtrack. And so that one's be quite fun to listen to as well. And just wanting to note, if you are wanting to buy that, to purchase the additional soundtrack, then it is on Steam. As you can see here, I've already picked it up myself. And basically it's a separate download that you can do. It costs £5 UK. I don't know what the equivalents are in, other currencies, but yes, it's not a huge amount extra on top of the DLC itself. So yeah, so if you wanted to pick that up, you can do that. The other way of getting at it, of course, is to go via the actual Factorio page, where you will scroll down and you'll see content for this game, and you'll have the DLC there as one of the options, this one being the Space Age soundtrack, and you just purchase from there. Now, I don't believe that it's available on the Wooby website. You can buy the game itself, and from what I can tell, it's not actually available as a DLC on GOG, for example. So you've got the original game and the DLC, the soundtrack is available for that, but Factorio Space Age doesn't appear to have the associated DLC with it. I wonder what random rubbish it's recommending there. But yeah, so I don't know whether they'll be making that available there as well. But I say, currently not available that I can see on GOG or their own website, just on Steam. Just Fixing Bugs by Clonan. We're all quite busy fixing bugs these last few weeks, so work on features and quality of life improvements that we could typically exposit about in the Friday Facts are on the back burner. We do have a nice graph of automated crash reports since the last release though. So this is the chart here. What this is actually showing is a 3-hour moving average. So if you're wondering why they're doing a 3-hour moving average, basically, for one thing, it's very spiky in reality. You get somebody, a group of people crash at 1 minute, and then there'll be nothing the next minute, and then there'll be a bunch more on the next minute, and then loads, and then a few, and so basically by averaging you get a bit of a clearer picture, because it's very spiky otherwise. Why they're doing a 3-hour moving average is basically then you can see the trend a bit better, so you can sort of see, right, well, it's declining or it's still quite high or what have you, because you're basically moving that average in time, and you're saying, well, how many are there in this period, and then moving that period on. It's a fairly common thing in stats, and say it's really about looking at trends. One of the things that's particularly fascinating about this chart, so the different colours represent the different versions. So you've got 2.07, 08, 09, 010, 011, 12, 13. And so you can see those being released, and then obviously there's a whole bunch of crashes associated with them as people update. But what you'll notice here, like the red line continues on and is still getting crash reports all the way out here on sort of, today, basically, the 1st of November. And that's because some people aren't updating. So you're getting quite a lot of crashes from people who just aren't updating the version. So there could be quite a lot of these, smaller numbers basically are actually, they're fixed bugs, but they're not updating the game. And we'll sort of come back to that. You can set it to auto-update, and particularly for the experimental version. It will just keep updating as the experimental versions come out. You don't have to keep selecting the next experimental version. So yeah, interesting chart. These, the lines here, the major axes, that it's 2 days, so basically 21st, 23rd. So halfway along this is, a day, so 21st, 22nd, 23rd. So what you can see is effectively spikes around when people are playing. So as the new version gets released, people download it, and then an appropriate, time, usually evening sort of thing, you'll get, a surge in crashes because there's more people playing, basically. But yeah, they've maintained quite a release cadence, and these are, there's like multiple bug fixes in each of these. It's quite impressive when they do this stuff, I must say, because it's not always easy to fix bugs, and it does go on to mention there are quite a few outstanding ones, but it's not easy to fix bugs and not generate new bugs, basically, which is probably a testament to the testing that they do, the QA testing. For a bit of a release retrospective, given how 2.0 and Space Age was the biggest launch we've ever done, things went way smoother than we anticipated. This could be due to many factors. Firstly, cleaner code and a higher development standard. Secondly, better PR review and QA process. PR is probably pull requests, so as in reviewing what you do essentially, when you're working on the game, is you will pull a version of it, do your updates, and then, reintegrate it basically. And so PR review would suggest they're basically looking to see, well, why is that? Why are you pulling that version out? And what are you going to do, basically? Because you can imagine someone just pulls a version, does a load of changes, messes a load of stuff up, and pushes it back, and the whole game's broken. So yeah, that would be likely what the PR review is. QA, just quality assurance process. That will be where they're doing testing, basically. So I already know, because they've spoken about it in the Friday Facts a couple of times, that they have quite a suite of automated tests. But obviously people, would do, bespoke testing as well. But what you would typically do is you're making changes or adding things in or making tweaks, and you would modify that standard change set, and then the whole game is then tested, with that modified change set, and you also incorporate those changes. You incorporate those tests, those new tests, back into the test suite, basically. The LAN party and subsequent closed beta testing, there were a lot of bugs identified, I didn't find that many bugs, if I'm honest. I think there were a couple. There was a lot more that I thought were bugs, but I think it were intended features. And obviously there was like a feedback thing generally as well. But I do know that, they were on the Discord, there were quite a few bugs posted. So that obviously helped a little bit as well. Oh, and also just to mention, it says about here, it's the biggest launch they've ever done. This is, this peaks here at, 750 on the, whatever, so that's 2.07 was basically the release candidate that went out. Does that make sense? So this is launch day, basically. So this is the absolute peak when they had the kind of most buggy, shall we say, most crashy version. And so each version has kind of declined from that. But also, if you remember, they said that 400,000 people bought the expansion. Was that that was on the Friday, wasn't it? So by the 27th, 26th, 5th. I can't do the maths in my head, sorry. But basically, at this point, 400,000 people were playing the game, and you were only getting a rolling average of 300 crashes. That's pretty remarkable. And a lot of this, I'll be frank, I wouldn't be surprised if this is people installing mods or trying to update games that, have got mods on and stuff like that, and the mods are actually the cause of the crashes. That's not, given how many mods there are and how many people play with mods, that wouldn't surprise me at all. That is not to say there were zero bugs and crashes, but generally it seems like most players could load the game and get right into having fun and not encounter showstoppers. Still, with over 300 open bugs sitting on our forums, we have our work cut out for us. And yeah, the forum is probably one of the best places to report bugs, and kind of don't worry about thinking, is this really a bug or that sort of stuff. They do have a whole process for filtering that stuff out. So if you found something, you've got a little thing that doesn't make sense or looks like a bug to you, then do report it on the forum, because, as I say, they will filter it out and see if it's a duplicate and what have you. I think it also gives you the option to upload your game files and stuff like that, so do take advantage of that if you have found bugs and errors and problems. Experimentalists assemble. At this time, we have been pushing releases as stable quite quickly after release. But as we start fixing lower priority bugs, the chances of a bigger issue sneaking through increase. That is why we would like to slowly transition to having experimental releases stay experimental for longer. So what they do, if you're not in the experimental release, and I say we'll talk through how to do it, but if you're not in the experimental release, the new versions come out in experimental first, and so they get tested essentially by people who are signed into the experimental version, who are using the experimental version. And so if there are any problems that have been introduced, because it doesn't matter how big your sort of testing set is, when the thing gets out into the wild, people will cause problems, and there is nothing better really for bug testing than like a gigantic community of people playing it. It's just the reality of there'll be so many lines of code in there that no human could possibly understand absolutely everything and know exactly what's going to cause a conflict or cause a crash. So the best way to test it really is to get it out into the wild and get it tested. And what they're saying basically, and it has been I've seen it, I've basically every day I've loaded it up, there's been a new version. As you can see by this, there's quite a cadence of release versions. And so what they're saying is they'd rather sort of calm that down a bit and do maybe bigger periods where it's sat in experimental, and those signed into experimental will be effectively testing it, and then once it's stable they can put it out. They'll probably allow them to say, obviously there were a lot of tiny bugs and a lot of tiny tweaks, and because it's a reducing list now, it means they can then sort of compile more of them up and do a release that's, say, 100 bugs rather than 10 bugs type of thing. So this is a call basically to sign up to the experimental version. That's always been, they've always had that version, and a lot of games do. They often call it a beta version or a beta test version or a special version or experimental access version, all sorts of different ways of talking about it. But they've always had that, and you could always sign into it. But if you're not familiar, we'll go through how to do it. For this to work, we need more people to opt in to the experimental release, which can be done in two ways. If you're on the website, you can go to Settings, Other, Enable Experimental Updates. If you're on Steam, you can right-click on Factorio in the library, go to Properties, then Betas, Beta Participation drop-down, and the latest 2.0 Experimental. By joining the experimental releases, it will give us a better ability to test the game before wider distribution. You'll also be first in line when it comes to encountering new bugs, which we would very much appreciate being reported on our forum. So I guess first thing to note is, if you weren't aware, if you bought the game on Steam, you can actually link your account, your Steam account, to your Wooby account, and that will then allow you to download the game from the website. I've actually mentioned this before, but if you weren't aware, you can do that. Obviously, if you bought it from them, then directly on the website, then you would be able to download it directly, and you can also then do the same linkage and have the game on Steam as well. You get a Steam code for it. So having it on both is not uncommon, but just if you weren't aware that you can do that. If you have downloaded the game from the website, then it will be a separate executable that you will start up on your desktop somewhere, or be on your file. You will know where you've put it. So if you are wanting to use that experimental version, you want to participate in the beta tests of the next versions, the experimental versions, then what you need to do is go to settings. You then go to other. You then come down to this part here, and you want to enable experimental updates. So if you, as you can see, I have that turned on, but if you don't have it turned on, then you'll be on the stable version. If you switch that on, then it will download the experimental version. It will also prompt you whenever they do a new experimental version to update the game to that next experimental version. So you'll constantly be on the experimental version or the latest release. So at the point where they declare it stable and they don't have an experimental, you will be on the latest anyway. So if you want to participate in that, one of the things I would say is most game companies, most software, you kind of taking your, taking it into your own hands really as to whether, the game will work and what have you. My experience, I was in the beta, I was in the experimental version of the Factorio, version 1, the original game. I don't think I ever had a single crash. I don't think I ever found a bug and reported a bug. What they put out is very stable by, most standards. And you can always, if you do have problems, you can always come here and turn that back off again, and you'll go on the stable version. So yeah, I would recommend doing it. It does help them out and give them more data if there are crashes, basically. You can also, for this, upload the crash logs. You can tweak those settings. I would recommend having those on, basically, or switching that one on, because it does provide them with a crash log when you get a crash. You can turn that off if you don't want to provide that data. If you want to do the same thing on Steam, if you're a Steam user and you want to participate in the experimental version, then all you do is you come to your library. I happen to have Factorio up on my favourites, but find it in your library list here. You want to right click on it. You want to go to properties. You then see this sidebar here with the list. You want to go to betas, and then you want to do a drop down there. You then want to find the experimental version, basically. So as you can see, it's talking about outdated, stable, and all that sort of stuff. There are loads of versions available. So basically, you're looking for the experimental one. At the moment, it happens to be 2.014. It will be listed in this list somewhere here, and so you can pick that up. If you're wanting to go back to an old version, say for example you've got some mega base on the go and you want to go back to a 1.x version, then you can also find that in the list here. I would actually recommend linking your Steam account to your Web account, if you're a Steam user, and downloading it as a separate thing so you can have both versions on the go at the same time. But if you're just wanting to step back and like play the old version for a while, then it's possibly worth doing it here. Whatever you select in this list, it will download, and that will be the version Steam will launch when you launch it from Steam. Okay, so Steam, I think that's right. I don't think Steam allows you to have multiple installs of the same thing. But basically, yeah, you need to find the experimental version, which it's often down the bottom, but it could be at the top somewhere. You'll just have to look for it in the list. Click on that. So, for example, I could do this console version, for example, which is obviously the 1.1 version. But so you could also step back to, so if I wanted to download, and it gives you must disable DLC in the Steam menu. So, even telling you what to do there. But yes, you want to find the experimental version, enable that. It will then download that. Once you close this dialog, it will then download that version. Okay. You'll see my Steam library, all my hundreds of games, most of which I've never played. As always, experiment on your thoughts in the usual places. I'm wondering about doing a kind of I don't think 2.1 and whatever it might bring will happen until after Christmas. It's my sort of feeling that they'll just focus on, bugs and then probably take a well-earned break over Christmas, and they'll come back maybe fresh in the new year and sort of think about what they actually want to put in 2.1. I mean, you never know. They might do one before Christmas, but it just feels like they're almost setting themselves up for problems if they, put it out before Christmas. I mean, they could talk about it in the Friday Facts, what they're thinking, I guess. But I suspect we'll get a month or so of kind of bug fixing, and then, have a good Christmas type post, and they'll come back with new ideas and tweaks and changes that they want to do after Christmas. But that's just a speculation, basically. I thought we might try and do a little bit of a speculation. I hope that in that version 2.1 we get the whole circuit network, circuit networks able to communicate either between planets or between platforms and planets or something like that. I'd really quite like that. I'd quite like my Volcanus to be talking to my Aquilo and all that sort of stuff. I wouldn't be also surprised some balancing tweaks. I think some of you realise now that landmines are really effective in space, and it's a bit of a weird thing. I was a bit surprised that didn't get nerfed. I mean, landmines are a bit OP anyway. It's sort of one of the hidden secrets of their combat. But basically, I sort of suspect that they may get a little nerf because, as I say, I think people are realising that if they just put a stack of landmines on the front of a platform, it'll just get wherever it's going, basically, especially if you've got them in the inventory. I think the nerf would probably be a stack size penalty, although they're actually relatively easy to make on the platform because, of course, it's just, relatively simple ingredients. So you can send up a load of ingredients and just manufacture them on the platform. But yeah, so I suspect there might be some combat balancing, as I say. I do wonder about as well, another thing I would quite like to have is a bit of a tweak to the quality stuff, particularly how it's presented. I know there have been some really good ideas on kind of Reddit and the forums about how to present it a bit better, because I never really did a lot with the quality in my playing. We would just, on the LAN, we put some quality modules in and we got some quality like solar panels and stuff like that. And I've kind of been sticking with that. I've not done that much quality stuff. I've got quality bits and pieces, personal equipment for my power armor, and I say more solar panels, some accumulators, that sort of thing. But as I'm using it a bit more and sort of messing with it and playing with it, it is quite clunky how you select things. You're doing a lot of selecting through menus, and it's a bit of a pain, if I'm honest, to have so many. It's effectively like you've got this sprawling menu already, and then effectively there's 5 versions of that, but accessed through a weird sort of scroll list type of thing, drop down lists and all those sorts of things. And you can use, there's that shortcut of, I think it's Control Alt. I always forget it. It's Shift Alt or Control Alt or something that allows you to just use the scroll wheel to go through the quality. I don't know. I mean, this was one of my recommendations from, hopefully I put it in. I remember talking about it, but it's inconsistent how it does quality filtering for inserters and requester chests for me, because with inserters you can do greater than. So if you want to do, one chest has all of my normal stuff in, and then another chest says anything that it's made that's quality, you can use greater than to say, right, well, if it's greater than normal, put it in this other chest. But in terms of the actual requester chests and stuff like that, you have to put individual requests on. And it's really clunky, in my opinion, of sort of saying, right, well, I want to request all of my solar panels above a certain quality level. You've got to manually set all these requests in it. And it initially blocks, unless you change the quality first, you can't reset, so if you want solar panels of level 2, 3, 4, whatever quality, then, you put the level 2 ones in, and you want to do the level 3 ones, where you've got to select the quality first and then do the option. Do you know what I mean? So it's blocks you from. And it makes sense, I guess, because it doesn't want you to do 3 separate requests for exactly the same item, which you could easily accidentally do. But it just feels a bit sort of clunky and, a bit much in a sense. So yeah, so I would hope for some changes really around how quality is accessed in the menus. It's just a bit sort of, it would be nice in particular to have like a drop down that sort of does some way of setting, I suppose, that you never want to do anything other than level 2 quality or something like that, and that it just goes to that by default maybe, because you're having to select it every time is a real pain. I also am finding the interrupts thing a bit confusing. I've started messing about with that and doing it for fuel. Some of the like terminology it uses, like it says any and all, and it's like, well, what does any mean in this context, and what does all mean in this context? So yeah, it's a bit sort of, it sort of assumes what it already means in a lot of places. So I think a bit of tweaking there would also be very much appreciated as to what that's all about. I also did a very, very simple look at parameterisation. It doesn't appear to explain it at all in the game. I'm sure, content creators and stuff will come up with some tutorials and all that sort of stuff, but I found it a bit sort of like, I don't even know what this is meant to be in a sense. I obviously went back and had a look at the Friday Facts, and I think I get it, but it seems very, very techy without a very good explanation. So yeah, so I think that's an area that could do with a little bit more detail in terms of, I don't know, like pop-ups or just like tooltips or something like that maybe, because it sort of, I think once you get to know it, it'll work and you'll understand it. But just looking at it as it's almost like taking circuit networks and doing like super circuit networks, like an enhanced version of them that are just like even more complicated, and you sort of go through this, it feels like it's a filter, where it's like very basic circuit network things and logistic request things, and then you have to get over a hump basically in order to start doing proper circuit network things, and then there's another hump to go like more abstract with circuit networks, and then there's a final hump to get to parameterization, and it's like that's quite a barrier to get to there. I suppose I don't think it'd be a problem if it just remained something that only some people messed about with, but it does feel like it could do with a little bit more in-game explanation. I'll be honest, quite a lot of stuff does. It's one of the things I've been compiling up is like very simple tips. It's like, I don't think it really even makes it clear, in my opinion, or clear enough, that you can hand recycle on Fulgora, that when you arrive, that's how you get your first bits and pieces, especially if you're bootstrapping. Obviously, if you arrive with stuff, it's not quite as much of a thing. But doing your first bit of recycling to unlock those techs, you have to do it manually, and it sort of doesn't really, or I don't feel it properly just says that like it should do. I think it's this thing, it comes back again to me of, there isn't really there's the tips and tricks, which are sort of tutorializing, but there isn't like a story that, steps you through the tutorial steps. And I can understand, I have seen a couple of things, for example, on Reddit, of just people going, how do I even get a recycler? How do I do recycling if I don't have a recycler? And it's because it's hand recycling that and it doesn't explain that really. Or at least it doesn't, pop it up and say, this is what you need to do, which I don't know. It's sort of, I guess to some extent they have to design it for people who are already familiar, because it'd be annoying if it had that pop up every single time you played through, and that's going to be your experience 99.99% of the time. That's what you're going to be doing, playing through again. So it's only really the first time where it's a problem, you see. So yeah, I guess they have to design it for that. But it does feel like it could do with a bit of a wiki type thing. The wiki is actually quite lacking quite a lot of the detail, I guess because people are playing it. But there's quite a lot of stuff that isn't on the wiki. It's obviously in Factoriopedia to a degree, but even that doesn't really explain quite a lot of stuff. It's more like a reference guide than the wiki is quite explainy. It sort of says stuff and you read it through and that's what that means, and whereas the Factoriopedia is more like just the facts, man. It's sort of, here it is, here's your resistances, without really explaining what that means, But yeah, I think there's so much of it that it's, it feels like there needs to be a little bit more hand-holding in the game, I guess. I hope you enjoyed today's Friday Facts video and might consider coming back for another one. If you want to chat about the Friday Facts or Space Age, you can find me live streaming Factorio on both Twitch and YouTube at the weekends. Thanks for watching. Cheers. Perfect, one take wonder.